Right, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Alison Saunders, has issued consent to sex toolkits for the police and all lawyers involved in rape cases. It's no longer a case of just no means no. This has been clarified. Defendants in rape trials will have to show why they believed their victims decidedly said yes. But if she said yes when she was incapable of knowing what she was doing, that's not consent. And nor is not saying no in that same situation. So does absence of refusal to sex amount to consent? Natalie, there you are, campaigner against domestic abuse. Now, let's navigate our way through this. There must be clear, unambiguous, unequivocal yes. Is that, I mean, a lot of communications in those situations are non-verbal. Is this clear-cut? Are there any grey areas?
I don't think there are any grey areas. If you're going to place a part of yourself into somebody else's body, you know, why would you want to do that without being able to confidently state that, yes, that person wanted that to happen? And I think, you know, that's the problem, that often this becomes blurry, and this is, you know, the reason that people are concerned about this consent stuff is because there's this belief out there that women are constantly crying rape and that they're lying about it. And that's just not what is seen across society. Women don't report. Women, it takes a lot, and men who are assaulted. Men can be assaulted too.
Yeah, sure.
You know,
there's no problem of interpretation here. You think it's absolutely clear cut.
Yeah.
What if you were very, very drunk and you said yes, and then the next morning you really thought, I didn't want to say yes, I was just completely out my head? What about that situation?
I think we've got to look at the fact that rape is not about whether somebody is fundamentally about the rapist. So why is the conversation, why is the immediate conversation, what does she feel like after the event? What about the fact that he's intentionally targeted somebody who's drunk? Surely that should be the thing we're talking about, because we're not talking about people waking up and going, oh, that wasn't very good. We're talking about people...
I'm saying about she was, you know, so drunk that the situation was chaotic, and you know, she really the next morning she does feel that she's been violated. That's what I'm talking about. Not the situation where, oh, I wish that had never happened. I wanted it to happen at the time, but now I regret it. That's a different issue. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think if somebody feels violated, then we have to acknowledge that is a concern. That means that something has happened that is not okay. And actually, consent is better for everybody. Having explicit consent makes sex better, because obviously within relationships we should really be enthusiastic. I mean, consent is too low a bar. We should be seeking enthusiasm. Is the kind of, you know, hope, isn't it? You know.
Just one more. What about the situation that if you consent to sex with a condom, but ultimately he did not use a condom, is that rape?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if somebody has sex with me without a condom and I get pregnant, that was against my consent. I have, you know, the implications of a pregnancy, of choosing to either continue that pregnancy or have an abortion, have an enormous impact on my body. And so, or, you know, if they've got a HIV, if they've got an STD, that, you know, this is too serious to kind of go, oh, well, I accidentally forgot. No, we need to be intentional about this.
Mike Buchanan from Justice for Men and Boys, you set up this political party. I think you've got candidates standing at the next election. You're also the author of Feminism, the Ugly Truth. This is clear, isn't it? This is absolutely clear-cut. Natalie's made some very potent points. It's about actually being a civilised human being, ultimately, isn't it?
No, I think men and women have always understood about consent to sex. Now, I'd like first of all to say that... I'd like first of all to say that the narrative here started off exactly as I expected it to, that it's to do with consent from women. But we know from major government surveys that over a quarter of sex offenders against the opposite sex are carried out by women. And we have 7 pages on the sexual abuse of men and children in our manifesto.
But Mike, we're talking about rape, and rape is defined by a woman cannot be a rapist. The legal situation.
Well, of course, because the Sexual Offences Act 2003 was drawn up by radical feminists.
Okay.
Of course.
Let's bring it back.
Really?
Let's bring it back to this whole consent issue. Do you really believe there are grey areas?
I think it can be quite. You know, no one would say that a man, let's say, targeting very drunk women, could be justified in. You know, I wouldn't say in the month of Sundays. But what about mild drunkenness? What about a sober woman who targets drunk men to have sex with and perhaps get pregnant by? And then these men have a 20-year responsibility.
85,000 women a year are being raped.
They are not.
You're talking about...
They are not.
You've just used government statistics. I can use statistics.
We presented Laura Bates with a Lying Feminist of the Month awards for exactly that claim.
So kind.
Well, she's from Everyday Sexism. Can I just get back to the consent issue? I just want to say, give me a situation when two people have gone for a night out that there is a grey area. Have you been in a grey area yourself?
Yes, I have.
What was that? What happened?
Well, I guess, had a drink or two, and a woman had a drink or two. But at the end of the day, it's about
it was clear. Surely consent was absolutely clear.
Yeah, I think it was, but we're in a situation...
It's not a grey area, then?
Well, no, but what I'm saying is that, what is happening is that women are being taught to not take any responsibility for themselves, none at all.
It's not about not taking responsibility.
So they have the Chardonnay goggles on, and they go to bed with Brad Pitt and wake up with John Prescott.
Hang on, but this is about this is about infantilising men. If we say that men aren't capable of making a choice to have sex, it's not about taking responsibility away from women. It's saying men can't help themselves. Men are going to kind of not be able to be competently choose to, and women to check that other person definitely wants to have sex. And if men can't do that, then we've got a real problem.
I can't believe that everybody seems to be saying there are no grey areas. Of course there are grey areas. Look at the Ched Evans case. There were two men. They both had sex with the same woman on the same night, in the same place, presumably within minutes or not much more than about half an hour of each other. One was found guilty, the other was not found guilty.
But maybe that's
of course that is a grey area. How can that not be a grey area?
What other grey areas are there? What's your message then to young men and women?
Well, my message to both young men and women is don't get into the grey areas, if you like. Our message to young men is, of course, you have to make sure that this is more than consent. But the message to young women is make sure... I used to help run a police self-defence course. And my friend, the policeman who ran it, the first thing he taught on the rape class in the course was make sure you say no. You may have 3 men at your throats with knives. It may be obviously rape. You may be kicking out. Make sure you say no.
What a rape class for women in how not to get raped? I mean, fundamentally, that's problematic. Surely, if we're going to talk about how not to commit rape, that should be about men not raping, not about women making different choices.
This is absolute... No, I'm sorry. I agree with an awful lot of what you say, but that really is ridiculous. That's like saying the police shouldn't tell us how to lock our houses to keep them secure because it's not our fault.
But you can't do anything about the fact that you have...
Of course it's the criminal.
But there's a societal...
Still lock your door.
But the societal message is that women are permanently sexually available.
No, it's
not.
That's a silly thing to say.
It really is not.
That's a silly thing to say because, I mean, we should educate people from Margate to Maesteg in their schools about being sexually responsible and sexually informed. The difficulty is, and I think you're slightly guilty of this as well, is to make it sound like it's just about women. It's not about women, it's about all of us being responsible citizens. And of course there's a grey area. Two people drunk, they end up in a situation. When you've been drinking yourself, you're probably not going to be the best communicator and judge of somebody else, and you see what you want to see. That's a grey area. Now, no one's justifying rape here, but we have to have an honest conversation, because if we don't, we either drive it underground, or people who are actually not guilty of something are found guilty.
Do you think then, Lambert, there's a situation that if two people are blind drunk, that's an extremely dangerous situation?
Of course it's a dangerous situation, not least because of the questions of contraception that you said.
Not least because it's now becoming...
Richard.
Well, if the woman is drunk, it's becoming impossible for her to consent.
I don't think that's the case at all.
Just tell me more. Then Natalie, you can respond. Let him develop his point.
The way I've read the American accounts of what's happening in universities is if the woman is drunk, she is deemed incapable of having consented. So, and that's the zone you're getting into. Obviously, it is a good idea that the law should press down on the unruly laddishness of boys. That's good that it happened. But if it opens up a kind of permissiveness about the laddishness of girls, then that's not so good. And that's where we're getting.
I think this is where we need to come back to education, because next week we'll be voting on the End Violence Against Women bill in the National Assembly, and we want to see education from a very young age into healthy relationships, because no, it isn't just about the women, but it's about how we interact with each other. And from a young age, if you're in a particular family, you may have a particular perception as to how you treat the opposite sex. And I think you do get a lot of this from the media as well. You do get the perception where the women feel like it's their fault. Look at the way Ched Evans' victim has been persecuted. Tell me now if that's right. It is unacceptable. And I think that's in the press, that's been allowed to happen, and it's been perpetuated.
It's on social media, a lot of it.
And if we had those education structures from a young age, I think we might not be having this debate here today.
Lambert, do you seriously think that there are spurious claims of rape flying around?
Well, we know there have been. They've been recorded. That occasionally happens. Now, I think...
Occasionally, very occasionally.
But it does happen, and if we live in a just society, you can't say, well, it's OK if a small number of people are found guilty of a crime they didn't commit.
Or even accused. Their life can be ruined.
But there's a lower false reporting rate for sexual violence than for any other crime.
That's because of the grey area.
No, it's because actually people don't get it, because
because there are only two witnesses there are only two witnesses to the crime.
But it's a lower reporting. People are not false reporting on this.
What you're asking people to do is express a level of competence in a necessarily unclear situation, for example, people who are drinking, which cannot be reasonable to the extent that you're wanting to say. Bethan's got it right. I think what Bethan said is about education and it's about judgment. My friend Nigel Evans, Member of Parliament, spent 2 years having his life wrecked because of claims that were made against him. He was found innocent of all the charges. Now, you said that it was mainly about women. He happens to be a gay man, but he really went through the ringer on that. And at the end of the day, he's not the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, even though he was proved to do nothing wrong. So let's not pretend that there are cases, that there are never cases that affect them.
Right. Audience in a second, if anyone wants to... I see you.
I'd like to talk about... This is part of the wider issue of moral agency. And the criminal justice system is incredibly lenient towards women. And we know that if male criminals were treated by the justice system with the same leniency as female criminals, 5 out of 6 men in British prisons today would not be there.
So why does only rapists get...
Do you know what? Wait. Do you know what? I'm going to leave you to it, OK?
Absolutely no leniency for a rapist. Some of them are out after 3 years. How you can throw out the word leniency when we're talking about rape, the most heinous, violent
Who kills a woman and gets 3 years?
against women, is frankly abhorrent.
The problem we have at the moment is underreporting and a lack of convictions. Certainly there are cases where people like Nigel Evans are dragged through the legal system completely unjustly. But the big problem we have is underreporting, under-convictions, and also this culture of victim blaming, where immediately when we start talking about this issue, it moves on to how drunk the woman was, what she was wearing. This says that the bigger problem is what's been talked about by the young lady there. It's not about men being persecuted and portrayed as rapists.
What do you think, Anne Atkins, about the what she was wearing point? That some people...
We've got a kind of blind spot on this, and I understand why, because 20, 30 years ago, 1 or 2 stupid judges... If you pardon
Contributory negligence was the phrase. Judge James Pickles, I think,
wrong. Completely wrong. If somebody commits a crime against me, that is not my fault.
Yes.
However, I have 3 daughters. I hope I'm bringing them up to protect themselves. I hope I'm bringing them up to be sensible and not put themselves into situations, just as I bring my sons up, not to put themselves into dangerous situations.
What do you mean by putting themselves into...
So, OK, all right, I'll give you a concrete example. We've got an 11-year-old going on 18, and a year or 2 ago, she started wearing makeup and hot pants, and she looked absolutely gorgeous, and she loves going down to the town and hanging around the shops. It's not a terribly exciting town, but she finds it very exciting. And I said to her, you look stunning, but if you're going to go down to town like that, go with a friend, make sure you've got your phone and be back in half an hour. Because I could see that young men would target her looking like that. She looked 18, for goodness sake, and she was 10.
The majority of young women are at risk from people they know, not strangers, for a start.
Of course they are.
And
yes. Surely, OK, can we all agree that this latest, raising the bar, which I think is a good thing, this latest thing is good because it's asking for more clarity. We all want more clarity. The men want more clarity. The women want more... No decent person wants rapes to happen, right? So we want more clarity.
But as soon as we start talking about what people are wearing, we're pandering to the idea that women shouldn't be able to wear exactly what
they
want.
Of course they can. No, look, no. Of course course they have a right to wear what they like. Of course they do. Some years ago, I drove my children down to Dorset. I was very distracted because one of them was ill. I came back a few hours later and I had left the front door completely wide open on a busy street, and something had been nicked. And, OK, I was not the criminal. The other person did wrong, but I felt a bit of a prat. Now, girls, there is nothing wrong with teaching your daughters, if you wear those clothes, you are entitled to wear those clothes. You have a legal right to wear those clothes and not be assaulted, but you are putting yourself at more risk.
No. Why are we talking about what women should be doing and not talking about the fact that men should not be raping?
Because I care about my daughters.
But this is about men's harm.
Natalie.
Yeah.
You know, men
yes,
know, rapists are not accidentally having sex with people.
I know your hand's up over there. I'm coming to you in just 1 second.
People are not.
The conversation took an interesting turn. Natalie.
Rapists are not accidentally having sex with women who are wearing. It's not about sex. Is not a rape is not about sex. It's about power fundamentally. And so this is not about sexual attraction. It's not about lust. It's about having power over somebody else.
Well. I wanted to talk about the fact that we're talking about this consent or the absence of it. Actually, I think we can train people. We like to say no. We can go to rape classes and say, you have to say no. But actually, in that shocking moment, do we have that vocabulary? Can we actually vocalise it? Are we in an emotional state
non-verbal communication
to be able to even have non-verbal communication? And there have been so many instances of people actually just freezing. Are we back there where we have to say...
No, it's still a crime. Of course it was still a crime. I only used that instance because there is nothing wrong with giving women tools to protect themselves.
And men.
Sorry, Natalie, do you think the situation then, given the fact that, you know, consent was inferred when two people were blind drunk and it wasn't actually consent, and then in the morning, because of the... As you well know, as we all well know, the difficulty of the situation, people don't want to go through the criminal justice system. It's so difficult for people to do that if it requires such bravery. Do you think there are some men walking around who have raped someone and don't, in their own minds, even think that has happened?
I think, you know, that people who commit crimes, who do terrible things, do rationalise that, don't they? And say, but don't even realise that they've done something right.
They might not have even considered the fact.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why this talking about consent is so powerful, because for men who are kind of going, oh well, she wanted it. You know, I mean, you only got to look at the Robin Thicke song Blurred Lines to see that young men are being told that she wants it, even though she clearly doesn't. You know, and so actually...
He actually wrote that.
We talk about social media, but that's...
to protect themselves. Well, so it was the other way round.
I think,
Sorry, Bethan.
Young boys and young men, especially, are watching more porn on television at a younger age or on the internet, and I think that's making them have a perception as to how they can treat women. And we're in the 21st century, and we're still faced with films like 50 Shades of Grey, where it's acceptable.
Women are flocking to see it. Women are reading it in their millions.
I disagree with the whole concept of what that film is trying to portray about a woman feeling that they should be dominated by a man.
But it is a chick flick. It is a chick flick.
Richard, it's a what?
I don't call it a
Richard?
chick flick.
You've got men who are judges.
It is a chick flick.
Richard D. North.
Dominatrixes.
Wait a minute, please, Richard.
People have indeed very mixed messages here, because that 50 Shades thing is a feminist phenomenon.
It's not a feminist phenomenon.
It's not your sort of feminism. There are different sorts of feminism. In its own way, it is a feminist phenomenon. I would have thought the thing here is that, yes, of course, young men ought to be taught that women's bodies are precious. But I've got a feeling that actually young women should also be taught that their bodies are precious. And yes, but in this issue, I think it is well worth remembering an older chivalric idea about women's bodies being precious. And men need to know it, women need to know it. And it is a good idea that mothers should say to their daughters, of course it's your perfect right to dress like a tart, but it's not very clever.
This is the problem, that uses words.
Nikki, this is exactly the problem. This is part of a wider issue about the way we think it's acceptable to speak about women and women's issues, and it goes beyond rape. It's to domestic abuse and attitudes more generally. We see that on the internet all the time, and language used, and I certainly don't think that sort of language helps.
Suddenly we haven't got a word for prostitutes, we've got to ban those words, as though no women are ever...
It's about shaming women and what we think, that low-level attitude that goes on in daily life, online, which I think encourages, in the end, the type of attitudes towards women that we see. The facts speak for themselves. Rape is underreported and it's under-prosecuted. So something is wrong with the system if that's the case.
Thank you. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all very much indeed.